It's time for another installment of The Basics, and on today's show, in regards to the Star Trek CCG, I had a question from a viewer who went to his first tournament early last year before everything happened in the world, and he was shocked to see how different the gameplay is. And this is in terms of what you can do in a house rules game versus how you have to play in a tournament, and that is, of course, by the straight rules from the different rule books and supplements. On this show today, I'm going to show you different ways you can switch up the game at home and how it is versus tournament play. Now, because I've been playing the Star Trek CCG since it came out in 1994, you can imagine I've played with a lot of people, and not only have I played in many tournaments, I've had different circles of friends that have all played the CCG, and over time we came up with ways to make the game either faster or a bit spicier, because let's face it, not everyone enjoys the tournament rules and wants to use them when they're playing with their friends. You want a more expedient game that's fun to play. One of the first things we did, and this is in regards to the seed phase that a lot of people hate, because seed phase could take up to 20 minutes or beyond depending on the size of the decks and the number of people playing. One of the things we did is that after putting down the missions to make the space line simultaneously, we would take groups of 4 or 5 dilemmas and also simultaneously slide them under our opponent's missions. This, combined with the missions going down on the table at the same time, cut the seed phase down to 5 minutes or less, getting us into normal gameplay. That being said, in regards to missions, we experimented with a number of missions being low as 4 and as high as 8. 4 being not enough points to go around to complete the game in case of all the dilemmas and what they did, and 8 being too high because you'd have to add so many more dilemmas to the seed deck and the game would drag out forever. This leads me into the starting hand of 7 cards. This is probably one of the few things from the tournament rules that we didn't screw with after a while, because after experimenting with as low as 5 cards in a hand to as much as 8 cards, it didn't really go anywhere and it actually messed up the game worse than it should have. So that we left alone. The draw deck, and this is not including a side deck, whereas you need 60 cards or more to actually play a game properly, we experimented with as low as 50 cards in a deck. That didn't go so well, and sorry Josh, I have to burn you again on this show, but remember that day we came up with a 200 card deck? It is so hard to try to construct a deck with that many cards in it that was a one and done experiment on one day, and to his credit, Josh constructed the deck in a half hour, whereas I took 2 decks, put them together, and added treaty cards and espionage. But it was painful. It was very painful. One of the other things we did was the red alert rule. So instead of having the red alert cards in our deck, how it worked was in house games, you could bring out as many personnel per turn from your hand as you wanted. Not ships and not equipment, just personnel. This only works so far as to if you had a number of personnel in each hand. If you did not, or only had one, you were pretty much up shit creek without a paddle, and we only used this rule for maybe several weeks, and then we canned it because it was never that good. One of the other rules that I can't show here because I'd have to put a clock on the table is we started setting time limits for certain games. So basically, whoever had the most points after a half hour would be declared the winner. And if there was a tie, it would go down to the number of personnel and ships left on the table. We tried this mainly because at the time, this was about 1998, 1999, we were still in high school, just finishing up, and we needed to speed the games up during our lunch break or spare periods. This proved to be okay, but when you put a time limit, it kind of kills the momentum in the game. Now, you will never see any of these at a tournament, but I would like to say that everybody should experiment with these on their own during house rule games, and even come up with a few of your own. There's always some fun ways to adapt the game and make it quicker and or more fun. Now, the only thing with everything I've just told you is that if you are building a deck for a house game versus a tournament game, there's going to be a bit of a difference because of the shortcuts you're taking in the actual gameplay. You might modify the deck differently for the house game than you were for the tournament games. Now, most of my decks, maybe all except for one, are built for tournaments, and they work quite well in house rule games as well. So I would more recommend people to keep their decks as a tournament standard rather than building it for a house rule game. That way you have no problems. That's all for today. Have a great day, everybody.